Okay, we're going to create two dice and then animate them being rolled. So we're going to start with the startup file of a cube, and we're going to begin by subdividing the surface so that we have a 5 by 5 grid on each side of the square or the cube. So we can hit tab to go into edit mode, or you can just select it down here, edit mode, and over on the left side under tools we'll select subdivide, and you can select the number of cuts here. If you don't see this, there's a little plus symbol that you can click on that brings up this menu, and we'll change this to 4 so you can see here we now have sides, 5 by 5 sides. Okay, now what we're going to do is go down here and select the face select, and I'll press A to deselect the whole thing, and basically we're going to select the numbers on each side of the cube now. So we can start with the 1 here and put 2 here and 3 here like this, and every dice are usually made so that the opposite sides add up to 7. So we had 2 on the opposite side, so we'll put 5 here. We had 3 on the opposite side, we'll put 4. And then on the top and bottom we've got 1 and 6. Okay, with these selected, we're going to come over to the left here and click on Extrude Individual. And just click on it, and without moving the mouse, hit Enter. And then we're going to come down here and change the pivot point to individual origins. This way they only scale in reference to themselves. And then we'll press S to scale and just move them in a little bit, maybe about 80% of what they were earlier, or to start with. And then we're going to click Extrude Individual again, and this time we're going to move them in just slightly, like that. Should be fine. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So we've got a nice cube here, and the next step that we're going to do is, before we color this, we want to select these faces around the original faces. So we'll click on select here and choose more. Notice how it will select the adjacent faces. That will allow us to color it the way that we want to. So once we have it like this, we can open up our window here and click on the Materials button, and we want to work in Cycles Render, so we'll change it from Blender Render up here to Cycles Render. And our material for the whole thing, can be the dice color. We'll click Use Nodes, and for the actual color of the dice, we want it to be white, and we're going to use the mix shader so that we can combine a diffuse with a glossy shader to get the look we're going for, kind of like a ceramic look. So we'll choose diffuse here and glossy, and we can leave the factor at 1/2 for now. And so this will be applied to the entire object, and then we're also going to create a new material slot here, and this one we're going to set to be black, and we're again going to use the mix shader combining diffuse with glossy, and we're going to choose black for this one. And also we're going to want to make it a little bit more towards diffuse, otherwise it becomes too reflective. Anything around 0.15, 0.2 should be fine. And we're going to click Assign, which is an important part of this process. That'll actually make the selection black. So let's click on this button here to render it and see what it looks like so far. So that looks pretty good. And it's just very dark. So maybe we can adjust our lighting now to give us a better sense of what we're working with. So we can take our, sorry, we're still in edit mode, so we hit Tab to go out of edit mode. Click on our lamp here, move our lamp over this way a little bit so it's closer to the camera. If we click 1 on the number pad, we can see our front view. We'll move it a little bit more so it's right over the cube. Side view looks good. And if we come over to our lamp preferences, let's change the size to 3. And we'll click Use Nodes and set the strength to 3000. That way it should be nice and bright. Now if we zoom back in, working with our cube here, and if we look at the rendered view, hopefully we get a little bit of a better sense of what we're making. So go back to the solid view and hit Tab to go back to edit view, and what we're going to do now is smooth out all of our hard lines so that it looks a little bit more like an actual dice. And for that we're going to use add a modifier, subdivision surface, and we're going to set it to 3. And now if we look at our rendered view, it's looking a lot more like an actual die. And I'm going to press Tab, go back to object mode, and change the shading to smooth, and that'll give us a little bit more of a look that we're trying to create. And then we just have one more thing to add to the die before we can duplicate it and create another one, and that is we're going to go down here, choose Vertex Select, and then select all of the vertices around the outside of the cube, of the die, and making sure that our pivot point is set back to median point. We'll just press the S button and scale them in a little bit, create a little bit more of a rounded corners look. Okay, then I'm pressing A to deselect, and if we look at our rendered view, it's looking pretty good. Looks pretty realistic. Okay. So now we can hit Tab, go back into object mode. This is when we want to actually duplicate our shape. So we can look at tools here, and then click on duplicate, and then we can just left click to set the location of the duplicate. And for now, we can just move them up a little bit. We're going to put a couple planes into our scene so that we can then have the dice roll along the plane. So we can go over here to create plane, and then we'll hit S button to scale it, and we can maybe put in 50 so it's hit enter, it's nice and big, and looks like it's at about the right place. And this now is a good time to actually set the material of the plane. So we can come over here to materials, add a new material slot, and then add a new material. We can make it like a bluish color, should be fine. And now if we go back to our rendered view, we can see what our color looks like. Yeah, it looks kind of like a felt table or something. Okay, you can mess around with that if you like. And another thing we're going to create now is one more plane that we're going to pull up here, and we want to rotate it, so to press R to rotate, and then press X to rotate it along the X-axis so that it can be, we're going to use it as something to get the dice rolling in a better sort of sideways motion. And then we'll scale this a little bit like that, and then scale it again just in the X direction by pressing S and then X to restrict it to the X direction. Okay, let's see how it's looking. Looks pretty good. I'm actually going to move it down a little bit and out this way. Okay, and this won't be in the shot, so it doesn't matter what its material is. So now we're going to set some of the physics for this so that they actually fall, and then roll off of these two surfaces. So with this plane selected, we can click on the physics engine here and click on rigid body, and we want to change this from active to passive. We don't want it to fall, we just want it to stay in place, but we want the dice to bounce off of it. Then we'll select the other plane here, do the same thing, rigid body, and then passive. And the two dice, we want just to be rigid bodies active. So now if we move them over here on top of our plane, I'm also going to actually scale them down a little bit. Let's say to 0.8 their original size. That way they both go to the same size. So I'm pressing S and then typing in 0.8, enter. And so let's see how this looks now. It looks like they're not touching, so we should be okay. So we'll just press the play button down here and see what happens. Alright, so they have a bit of a roll there. It's not perfect. I'm going to increase the size of this so it makes sure to hit the dice, and I'm going to move the dice a little bit higher up. Let's try it again. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Still wanting them to move a little bit more, so I'm going to try rotating this a little bit more by pressing R and then X, get it a little bit steeper, and then I'm also going to move the dice a little bit higher up again. Okay, let's see how it looks now. Okay, I think I'm actually going to move this back. Whoa, not delete. R for rotate X in the X direction. Yeah, but what I am going to do is I'm going to take each of these dice and I'm going to press the rotate button twice and just get them a little bit off of their normal just starting points. And let's see here, I'm going to have to separate them a little bit now so they're not touching each other. Okay, now let's see how it looks. Okay, that looks better, except one of them is way landing way further than the other one. So let's see if we can adjust that, get them a little bit closer to each other. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So we'll pause it there. I'm going to press 0 to see where our camera shot is. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so the camera screen takes up a bigger space using my middle mouse scroll wheel. And then I'm going to press N to open this display, and I'm going to check the box that says lock camera to view. This will allow me to manipulate this screen a little bit. So now I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button, get the dice a little bit more into view, and I'm also going to zoom out just a little bit. There we go. And now let's shift it up like that. Okay. Now let's try playing it again, see how it looks from this angle. Okay, it looks pretty good. And if we just change it to render view, we can see what our final shot would look like. Okay, looks pretty good. So now all we need to do is record. Let's go back to solid so it can process well. So let's look on here and see where it goes in terms of when the ending is. So if we press play, they come down, and if we were to pause it at about 160, maybe even 150, yeah. So we can set the end here to 150, and now we can go in and set our animation settings. So if we click on the render button here, and then go down here, we can set our output folder. Maybe you want it to be, for me it'll just be something called Blender Projects. And you can also set your output format, so movie, maybe QuickTime, or whatever you like. And then another important part is if you come down here to sampling, the higher number of samples you choose for the render, the longer it'll take, but the higher the quality will be. So I'm going to leave it on just 10 now to expedite the time that it will take for it to render. On my computer, it takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes for it to render a shot like this. Just to give you an idea of what the final result might look like, if we open a recent project and then pull up the rendered animation. This one has a orange background. This is what the animation looks like at the end. So it looks quite good, I think. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and see you next time.